The night my best friend vanished, I thought I'd lost her forever, until a single photograph proved she'd been hiding in plain sight, watching me. They did not expect me to walk through that door. Truthfully, I was not sure I expected it either. The wedding invitation had been sitting on my desk for weeks like a silent dare. Heavy cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, my name printed with military precision. Major General Cassandra Holt. Not Cass. Not Cassie. Not even a trace of familiarity, just the rank and the surname. As if stripping away anything personal would make me easier to stomach. 6 years had passed since I had last heard my parents' voices in anything other than a mistakenly forwarded voicemail or a cold mention at some military gala by an acquaintance who thought they were making polite conversation. No birthday calls. No messages when I nearly lost my hearing during a deployment in Helmand. Only curated silence. Now, out of nowhere, I was holding an invitation to my sister Leah's wedding. Inside, in her handwriting, there was no warm note, no olive branch, just one word written as though it were a command: behave. I turned the card over in my hands, wondering how they had even tracked down my current address. Maybe the Army's event protocol team had passed it along, or maybe Leah simply assumed her little public relations performance would not be complete without the family disgrace lurking in the back row. This was not an olive branch. It was a performance. I was not being welcomed home. I was being displayed as proof they had made the effort. People think revenge begins with rage, but mine started with disbelief, then settled into a quiet, aching curiosity. Did they still even know how to write my name? Outside my office window, the wind rattled against the glass of the Stuttgart training grounds. A new intake of recruits was mid-drill, loud, energetic, still untouched by the kind of wounds you cannot see. They had not yet learned what it felt like to be erased by the very people who had raised them. I envied their innocence. A knock broke my thoughts. Captain Simmons, my aide, stepped inside without waiting for permission. "You going?" he asked, glancing at the envelope. Simmons had a talent for knowing more than he said. "Just got the invite," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "That's what we're calling it." I did not answer. Because it was not an invitation. It was a test. Challenge. A warning. I had not decided whether to walk away or walk in. But if I went, I would wear the stars on my shoulders, not to boast, but to make sure they remembered I could no longer be erased quietly. Virginia greeted me like a staged postcard. Cherry blossoms in perfect bloom, sidewalks scrubbed clean, hedges trimmed to mathematical precision. The kind of beauty that looked flawless from a distance but suffocating up close. I parked across from the house I had once called home. The facade was the same, which somehow made the years between even heavier. I had not been back since my father's funeral, where there had not been a single empty seat for me at the front. I had stood the entire time in full uniform while my mother sat between Leah and Uncle Richard as if I were no more than a stranger in ceremonial attire. Today was Leah's rehearsal dinner. Somehow that felt worse. The door opened to the familiar scent of lemon polish, my mother's signature blend of disapproval and control. Barbara Holt stood in the doorway, her gaze lingering on my uniform for a fraction too long. "Cassandra," she said evenly, "please don't ruin this for Leah." Not hello. "You don't look well." Just a warning. Inside, the furniture and decor were frozen in time. The same china cabinet, the same chandelier, the same unspoken rules. 14 people were already seated at the long dining table. 15 chairs in total. Mine, naturally, was at the far end, pressed against the sideboard, where the heat from the kitchen would keep me faintly uncomfortable the entire evening. No one announced my arrival. No one made space for me near the bride. To them, I was just an unavoidable shadow. A cousin glanced at me and whispered the word security to the person beside her. I stayed silent. The reception hall, the following evening, looked like a glossy magazine spread. White linens, gold-rimmed plates, and an ice sculpture of intertwined initials. But the seating chart told the real story. My name was not spelled out like everyone else's. It was shrunken to a vague C. Holt at table 12, tucked by the catering exit. My napkin was a shade off from the others. Subtle, intentional. I had seen war zones with less strategic hostility. Leah floated through the room in a flawless gown, the kind of perfection that made people trust her even when she was twisting the knife. She paused just long enough to smile and say, "I told them not to make it too military for your side." Then she drifted away before I could respond. The toasts began. My father's words were bland, about new beginnings. My mother raised her glass to loyalty and grace, her gaze sliding over me like I was invisible. Then Leah took the microphone, champagne flute in hand, her smile calculated. "To think," she said sweetly, "even my big sister made it tonight, flying from wherever she's guarding doors these days." The laughter was instant, confident, cruel. My mother added, "She's the shame of this family, but at least she's punctual," and the room erupted. I did not flinch. Instead, I stood, lifted my untouched glass, and took a slow sip. When I set it down, the silence that fell was not from me shouting but from my calm. "The people I guard," I said clearly, "outrank everyone in this room." No one laughed after that. Not because they respected it, but because they no longer knew where to put me. Then I saw him. Andrew Carlyle, Leah's fiancé. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on mine. He did not laugh. He crossed the room, ignoring my mother's hissed warning and my sister's frozen smile. Stopping one pace away, he saluted, crisp, formal, regulation perfect. "This," he said loud enough to cut through the clinking glasses, "is Major General Cassandra Holt, my commanding officer. Please forgive my wife." A mic clattering to the floor. Leah's face drained of color before she collapsed. And in the chaos I felt something shift. This was not revenge. This was recognition. The ballroom fractured into chaos. Leah lay motionless on the floor. Her perfect gown sprawled across the marble tiles like a scene staged for the wrong kind of attention. Voices overlapped. Someone called for water, someone else shouted for a doctor. The band stopped mid-note. Through it all I stood still, my eyes locked on Andrew's. He lowered his salute slowly, the corners of his mouth unreadable. For a moment, it felt as though the room had emptied of everyone but the two of us. Then Colonel Reardon rose from his seat near the bar, his frame still rigid despite retirement. Without hesitation, he saluted me. No words, no theatrics, only respect. General Park followed, his expression unflinching. Then an older woman I did not recognize but whose bearing told me she had once worn her stars joined them. For salutes. For public acknowledgments that could never be unseen. My mother's voice cut through, sharp but shaking. "This is not the time." But no one turned toward her. The attention had shifted permanently, and the control she had always commanded in this family slipped like water through her fingers. Andrew's gaze stayed on mine for a fraction longer before he stepped back, giving me space, granting me the floor without a word. I did not take the microphone. I did not need to. I simply stood there, and somehow my stillness was louder than any toast that had come before. Later, when the evening limped toward its end, I slipped away from the reception hall into the quiet corridors of the hotel. My boots echoed faintly against the polished floor. In the lounge, dimly lit and smelling faintly of citrus and cedar, my mother was waiting. She sat in a pale cardigan, a blouse fastened to her throat, her posture rigid. "You certainly made a statement," she said. I remained silent, taking a seat across from her. "The media is buzzing," she continued. "Some of the coverage is favorable, some less so." She paused as if expecting me to fill the space. I did not. "I wasn't prepared," she said finally. "Leah wasn't either. None of us were. Your father." She stopped herself, then shifted. "I thought perhaps you could release a statement. Something neutral, clarifying that we didn't fully understand your position." It was almost laughable. "You want me to issue a statement," I said evenly. "Not to correct a lie, but to ease your discomfort." Her mouth tightened. "We didn't mean to hurt you. I was protecting the family's image. You were different. Loud. I was visible," I corrected. "Not the same thing." From my folio, I drew out a document and slid it across the table. She stared at it without touching it. 7 years ago, I said, an anonymous tip was sent to the Military Ethics Board. It accused me of falsifying combat reports, questioned my Bronze Star, and called me unstable. That year, my promotion to 1 star was quietly passed over. No explanation. Her eyes flickered. I slid another page toward her. Linguistic analysis. 96% match to Leah Holt. Secondary contributor, Barbara Holt. Her lips parted, then closed again. The first real crack in her composure. She sent it, I said. But you gave her the access, the language, the documents. It was your fingerprints all over it. For a moment she looked smaller, older. I made choices, she said softly. I didn't stop loving you. You just stopped calling, I replied. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. I was protecting Leah. She couldn't compete with. She didn't have to compete, I interrupted. She just had to show up, and you made sure I was too buried to be seen. Silence fell heavy between us. She reached halfway across the table but stopped short. You didn't lose me, I said. You pushed me out and then blamed me for not coming back. I rose, leaving the documents in front of her. If someone asks why I stayed away, don't say it was complicated. Tell them the truth. You made a choice and so did I. She did not follow me as I walked out. 2 days later I was gone from Virginia, my uniform stowed in its garment bag, my medals locked in a steel case. The Amalfi Coast greeted me with sunlight, salt air, and the kind of quiet that did not punish me. I rented a cottage high on the cliffs, where the sea stretched out without boundaries and the mornings belonged only to me. The clip from the wedding spread like wildfire, millions of views in days, strangers sending messages of solidarity. I never commented. I never explained. I let the image speak. A salute, a name, and the weight of respect that had been denied me for years. One afternoon, as I sipped espresso on the terrace, a figure appeared on the narrow stone path leading up from the village. Andrew Carlyle. His dress blues were gone. Instead, he wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked like a man who had been carrying a decision for too long. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, he said, stopping a respectful distance away. I wasn't sure either, I replied. He smiled faintly, but there was tension in his shoulders. You saved my life once, he said. I'm not sure I ever thanked you properly. You did, I said. That salute was more than enough. That wasn't gratitude, he said quietly. That was the truth. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The waves crashed far below, and the wind caught strands of my hair. I saw the conflict in his eyes. Duty, loyalty, and something unspoken. I didn't come here for her, he said finally. I came for you. And just like that, the air felt heavier, charged with something I had not allowed myself to feel in years. The next morning, the weight in my chest was heavier than the damp fog outside my window. I barely slept, replaying Serena's trembling voice in my mind. Someone in this office wants you gone. By the time I arrived at the firm, I was running on coffee and pure instinct. People greeted me with their usual polite smiles, but every one of them felt like a mask. I kept my head down and went straight to my office, closing the door behind me. I opened my email. Nothing from the board, nothing official yet. But there was a new folder on my desktop labeled Client Issues. My stomach tightened. I hadn't created it. Inside were documents, half-finished contracts, incomplete proposals, and emails that looked like I'd ignored them for weeks. It was a setup, but the precision of it was terrifying. Whoever was behind this had been planting seeds for months. At noon, Serena called. Elliot, you need to know something, she whispered. What is it? I asked, glancing at my locked office door. The board's meeting tonight without you. And guess who's presenting? I didn't need her to say it. The answer was already in my head. Graham Weston. Graham had been circling my position for years, waiting for the right moment to make his move. He'd always been charming in public, But his eyes gave him away. Sharp, assessing, predatory. I decided I wasn't going to sit and wait for the execution. That afternoon I went digging, not in the company server but in my archives. Backups, emails, and contracts are stored on my encrypted drive. And that's when I found it. A chain of correspondence between Graham and an outside vendor, planning to reroute a lucrative contract to a shell company in his cousin's name. The proof was here. But it wasn't enough just to confront him. I needed timing on my side. If I played this too early, he'd bury me before I could act. At 6:45 p.m., I walked into the boardroom uninvited. Every head turned. Graham's smirk faltered. "Elliot," he said smoothly, "this is a closed meeting." "Perfect," I replied, sliding a flash drive onto the table. "Then we can skip the small talk." The first light of dawn spilled over the city skyline as I stood at the balcony, coffee cooling in my hands. My mind felt strangely quiet, like the storm had finally passed. In the weeks since our confrontation, things had shifted. Nathan's empire didn't crumble overnight, but the cracks were visible. His board had called an emergency meeting after my report was leaked to the right people. The police had been slow, careful, but persistent. Nathan. He vanished from the public eye. His name now whispered in connection with fraud, not fortune. But it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. I'd spent so long being careful, walking invisible lines, making myself smaller so I could fit into someone else's vision of my worth. That ended the night I walked into that gala wearing red, every step daring Nathan to look me in the eye. Now I was building something of my own. The files I'd used to expose him had also opened doors. The investors who once circled Nathan like vultures now came to me, curious about my vision. My project Helios was no longer just an idea. It was in motion. And in motion, I realized, was exactly where I wanted to be. One evening, as the city lights began to glow, I received an unmarked envelope slipped under my office door. No return address. No note. Just a single photo inside. Nathan, sitting at a cafe in a city I didn't recognize, looking straight into the camera with a faint, knowing smile. The message was clear, he wasn't gone. Not entirely. I set the photo down, my heartbeat steady. Once that would have rattled me. Now it felt like a reminder. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was life. People like Nathan didn't disappear. They lingered like shadows at the edge of the streetlight. But shadows don't scare me anymore. That night, I wrote the final update for the board, sealing my place in this world. Not as someone's pawn. Not as someone's victim. But as the one who had looked power in the eye and refused to blink. When I stepped outside, the wind caught my hair, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere Nathan might have been watching. Somewhere he might have been plotting. And I smiled. Let him. I had already learned the most important truth. You can't control the storm, but you can stand in it and refuse to be swept away.